I wasn't supposed to be home that evening. The meeting had been scheduled to run late, and I'd already texted my wife that I probably missed dinner. But something strange happened. The meeting ended early, too early, and for reasons I still can't explain. My chest felt tight the entire drive home, like my body knew something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. The house looked normal when I pulled into the driveway. Lights on, curtains half drawn, peaceful. I remember thinking, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it's nothing. I unlocked the door quietly. Habit. Years of coming home late had taught me how not to make noise. That's when I heard my daughter's voice. Not crying, not screaming. Something worse. She was speaking softly, the way someone does when they've learned that resistance only makes things harder. I stopped breathing. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before. Each step felt heavy, like the house itself was warning me not to go any further, or maybe urging me to hurry. When I reached the living room doorway, I froze. My daughter was on the floor. Not hurt physically. Not tied, but humiliated in a way I will never forget. She was surrounded by people who were supposed to love her, people who smiled politely in public, people who spoke about values, discipline, and respect. And there she was, my strong, intelligent grown daughter, being talked down to, corrected, controlled, and emotionally crushed under the excuse of teaching her how a woman should behave. I didn't understand it at first. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. One of them was talking calmly, almost proudly, explaining how she needed to learn her place. Another nodded in agreement, as if this was normal, as if this was necessary. My daughter didn't look up. Her hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white, and that's when I knew this wasn't a one-time thing. This was something that had been happening again and again, quietly, systematically, while I was away working, trusting, believing that my family was safe in their own home. I felt rage rise in my chest so fast it scared me, but I didn't move. Not yet. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. They thought I wouldn't find out. They thought I wouldn't understand. They thought I would agree. I watched for a few more seconds. That felt like hours. They spoke to her like she was a problem to be fixed, like her independence was a flaw, like her voice was something to be trained out of her. And then my daughter spoke very quietly. She said, "I understand." Those two words broke me because I knew she didn't mean agreement. She meant survival. That was the moment. I stepped forward. The sound of my shoes on the floor made everyone turn around. Room went silent. Faces drained of color, eyes widened, mouths opened, then closed again. No one expected me. I looked at my daughter first. She finally looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw something no parent should ever see in their child. Fear. Not of me. Of what would happen if I spoke. I took a slow breath, and I said the calmest words I have ever spoken in my life. "Explain to me exactly what's going on here." No one answered. Because they all knew this wasn't going to end the way they planned. No one spoke. The silence after my question was thick, suffocating. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, loud and arrogant, as if it had been watching all of this happen for weeks. I looked around the room slowly. Every face avoided my eyes. That told me everything. I walked over to my daughter and knelt beside her. I didn't touch her at first. I didn't want to scare her, didn't want her to think this was just another performance. When I finally placed my hand gently on her shoulder, she flinched. That small movement shattered something inside me. "How long?" I asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "A while." A while could mean anything. Days, weeks, months. I stood up. That's when they started talking. All at once, excuses colliding with each other. She's too stubborn. She doesn't listen. She needs guidance. We're only trying to help her. This is how things are done. I raised my hand. They stopped immediately. Funny how power works. I turned to the one who seemed most confident, the one who had been speaking earlier with that calm, poisonous certainty. You, I said, you were leading this. Start explaining. They straightened their back as if rehearsed. We were teaching her responsibility, humility. She needs to understand her role as a woman. You've been too soft on her. Too soft. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked a question that made their confidence crack. Did she ask for this? Silence. Did she consent to being taught this way? More silence. I looked back at my daughter. Did you? Her voice barely came out. No. That was it. The room shifted. Suddenly, they weren't educators. They weren't elders. They weren't protectors of tradition. They were bullies exposed under bright light. But before I could say another word, my daughter surprised me. Dad, she said softly, please don't make this worse. Worse, the fact that she believed this could get worse told me how deep this had gone. I sat down across from her and spoke slowly, deliberately, making sure every word landed. Listen to me very carefully, I said. Nothing that happens next is your fault, and nothing you say right now will make this worse. Her eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for far too long. That's when the truth started coming out. Not all at once, not dramatically, piece by piece, she told me. How it started as advice, then correction, then lessons. How they'd criticize her clothes, her opinions, her confidence. How every time she pushed back, they told her she was disrespectful, ungrateful, difficult. How they reminded her constantly that I wasn't home much, that she was lucky they were there to guide her. I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. They said if I told you, she continued, you'd be disappointed in me, that you'd think I was causing problems. I felt physically sick. They had used me as a weapon against my own child. I stood up again, this time slowly, deliberately, making sure they saw my face. You manipulated her, I said. You isolated her. And you did it under the disguise of culture and concern. One of them scoffed. You're exaggerating. That's when I did something they didn't expect. I pulled out my phone. I'm not, I said. And I can prove it. Their faces changed instantly because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my daughter had finally broken a week earlier. She had sent me voice messages late at night. Messages I hadn't opened yet because of work. Messages I had planned to listen to that evening. Messages where her voice shook, where she apologized for things she didn't understand, where she asked if she was really that difficult. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, raw, honest, unfiltered, the same people who had spoken so confidently moments earlier now looked like strangers caught in a lie. I stopped the recording. I have more, I said. Texts, dates, names, patterns. I looked directly at the one who had been leading this. And tomorrow, I added calmly, I will be speaking to professionals, legal advisors, and anyone else who needs to hear this. Now they were panicking. Suddenly the tone changed. We didn't mean it like that. You're misunderstanding. Let's not take this too far. Too far, I laughed then, not out of humor, but disbelief. You took it too far when you convinced my daughter that her silence was obedience. I turned back to her and held out my hand. Come with me. She hesitated, just for a second, then stood up and took it as we walked toward the hallway. I stopped and looked back one last time. This conversation isn't over, I said. It's just not happening on your terms anymore. Her grip on my hand tightened, and for the first time since I'd come home, I felt something shift. Not relief, not peace, but strength returning to both of us. That night, neither of us slept. I sat at the kitchen table long after my daughter went to her room. The house felt different now, like it had been holding its breath for months and had finally exhaled, but the quiet didn't bring peace. It brought clarity, and clarity can be terrifying. Around 2 a.m., my daughter came back out, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes tired but sharper than I'd seen them in a long time. "Dad," she said, sitting across from me, "there's more." I nodded. "I know. Take your time." She took a deep breath, then another. "They planned everything," she said. Who would talk? Who would correct me? Who would stay silent so it looked normal? My hands curled into fists. She explained how every interaction was calculated, how they praised her only when she obeyed, how they withdrew affection the moment she showed independence, how they rewrote events to make her doubt her own. Memory. Gaslighting. Systematic, cruel, effective. They even practice what to say if you ask questions, she continued. They said you were too busy to notice details, that you trusted them. That one hurt the most because it was true. I had trusted them, and they had used that trust like a knife. "What made you finally message me?" I asked. She looked down. "I started recording things just in case. And when I listened back, I realized how wrong it sounded. I didn't recognize myself anymore." She handed me her phone. What I heard next will stay with me forever. Audio recordings of conversations that sounded polite on the surface, but beneath them, control, condescension, psychological pressure disguised as concern. "You're too emotional. You don't understand what's best for you. A good woman wouldn't argue like this. Your father wouldn't approve." I stopped the recording and closed my eyes. They hadn't just tried to control her behavior. They had tried to erase her identity. The next morning, I made calls, not emotional calls, not angry calls, strategic ones. A therapist who specialized in emotional abuse, a legal advisor, a family mediator. By noon, something unexpected happened. Someone knocked on the door. It was one of them. Alone. They looked smaller somehow, less confident, less certain. I didn't know it went this far. They said quietly. I studied their face. "You participated," I replied. "Whether you knew or not doesn't change that." I swallowed. "I want to tell you everything." That was the moment the entire structure collapsed. They admitted there had been meetings, discussions behind closed doors, decisions made without my daughter present, about her future, her behavior, her limits. They admitted they believed fear was an effective teacher. They admitted they assumed I would eventually agree. And then they said something that chilled me. "We didn't think she'd fight back." I stood up. "She didn't fight back," I said coldly. "She survived. There's a difference." That afternoon, I sat with my daughter and told her something I should have said a long time ago. "You don't owe anyone obedience at the cost of your dignity." She cried then, not the quiet, contained crying from before, but deep, shaking sobs that released months of pressure. For the first time, she wasn't apologizing. She was healing, but the story didn't end there, because once people realize they're losing control, they often try one last move. That evening, messages started coming in. Accusations. Threats. Warnings about family reputation. Claims that we were exaggerating. I saved everything, because the truth doesn't need to. Shout. It just needs to be documented. And tomorrow. Tomorrow was the day consequences would begin. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Asterisk. Not because I was rested, but because I was resolved. My daughter was still asleep when I stepped outside, phone in hand, breathing in the cold air like I was preparing for battle. Because in a way, I was. Not a loud one, not a violent one, but the kind that ends lies by mid-morning. The first meeting took place, not at our house, neutral ground. Asterisk, a mediator, a therapist, Legal advisor and them, they arrived confident, or at least pretending to be. Smiles tight, words rehearsed. But something had changed. They no longer controlled the room. Asterisk the recordings. Spoke first, calm voices, measured sentences, undeniable patterns. Every excuse they tried to offer collapsed under its own weight. Asterisk, this was cultural. Asterisk, this was discipline. Asterisk, this was concern. The therapist didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Asterisk, this, she said, looking directly at them, is emotional abuse disguised as authority. Silence followed. Then consequences. Asterisk, clear boundaries were established. Legally documented ones. No unsupervised contact. Mandatory. Counseling. Formal acknowledgement of harm. Not revenge. Accountability. Later that week, the story reached places they never expected. Not gossip, facts, not shouting. Evidence. Asterisk, people who once nodded along with their values started stepping back. Invitations stopped. Phone calls slowed. Respect quietly disappeared. Asterisk, because nothing destroys false authority faster than the truth. Asterisk, that evening, I found my daughter sitting on the porch, watching the sky change colors. Asterisk, you okay? I asked. Asterisk, she nodded. I feel lighter. I sat beside her. I kept thinking, she said, that being strong meant staying quiet. But now I know it means being heard. I swallowed hard. I should have seen it sooner, I admitted. Asterisk, she turned to me. You came back early. That matters. We sat there for a long time. No speeches, no lessons, just healing. Weeks passed. She started therapy. Asterisk. She laughed more. She spoke freely again. One night she said something I'll never forget. Asterisk. They don't get to define me anymore. And she was right, because here's the truth. The one I want anyone listening to understand. Control isn't care. Silence isn't respect. Asterisk, and obedience born from fear is not virtue. Asterisk. If someone ever tells you they're breaking you down for your own good, they're lying. And if you're a parent like me, busy, trusting, believing things are fine, pay attention, because sometimes the most dangerous harm happens quietly in familiar rooms by familiar faces. Asterisk, I came back early that day by accident. Asterisk, but stopping it, that was a choice, and I would make it again, every single time. The end. Asterisk, if you want next. Asterisk, a strong YouTube description, SEO keywords, a viral thumbnail text, or to convert this into one full 20,000 word continuous script. Asterisk, just tell me what you want next.